Okay, so data privacy. Like when you download an app
Uh,
and you just kind of blindly hit agree on all those terms and conditions, well,
yeah.
imagine that,
Right.
but like on a national scale, because India's getting serious about where your data actually lives.
Yeah, it's interesting. India's not alone in this at all.
Right.
Like, this is a big trend. We're seeing countries trying to kind of take control,
Yeah.
like over their citizens' data. I mean, we saw it in Europe with GDPR.
Yep.
And now India is kind of jumping into the mix with these new draft rules,
Right.
which honestly have some pretty big implications for big tech.
So we're diving into this article from the Indian Express,
Okay.
laying out these new draft rules for data protection.
Right.
And it's coming up in 2025,
Yeah,
and it's kind of a data localization comeback story.
it is. It
Yes.
is. So they initially took data localization out of the 2023 Data Protection Act,
Right.
and now it's back.
Yeah.
So essentially what this rule would mean is that certain types of data that are
Okay.
generated in India have to be stored within India's borders.
So why is India making this move now? Like, what's the reasoning?
The article highlights IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw, and he's emphasizing,
Okay.
the safety of citizens and preventing disruption in different sectors.
Okay, so like big picture stuff.
Yeah. And if you think about it,
Yeah.
data security breaches,
Right.
they can have a massive impact, not only on like individuals, but on entire industries.
Entire industries.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's not just about this like vague idea of safety.
Right.
There's like almost a new sheriff in town,
Yeah.
a committee to make sure that, things don't get out of hand.
Exactly. The article talks about this proposed committee and its role
Okay.
in preventing unpredictable mandates from individual government departments.
Oh, so it's like an oversight committee?
Yeah, because without that oversight,
Right.
imagine businesses trying to navigate
Oh my God.
this constantly shifting regulatory landscape.
Yeah, it'd be a nightmare.
Total chaos.
When we say businesses, though, are we talking like the big guys?
Yeah,
Like Google, Amazon, Meta?
you got it. Those are the ones.
Okay.
The article calls them significant data fiduciaries.
Significant data fiduciaries.
Okay, so think of it this way. A data fiduciary is basically any entity
Okay.
that handles personal data.
Uh-huh.
So the significant ones are the ones that are dealing with massive amounts of really sensitive data.
Like what kind of data are we talking?
So think financial transactions, health records, or even information that could impact like India's elections.
Wow. Okay.
That's the type of data that makes a company significant in the eyes of these rules.
So those companies are going to have to completely rethink how they're approaching data storage
Absolutely.
if they want to keep doing business in India.
If they want to stay in the game,
Yeah.
they're talking about a potential overhaul of their entire infrastructure.
Which is a huge undertaking.
It's massive. The article mentions a potential 2-year timeline for companies to transition to the new law.
Yeah.
2 years seems like a long time.
It does. But when you're talking about a company that operates on a global scale
Right.
and having to rework their entire system to comply with these rules,
Yeah.
that's a pretty tight deadline.
Very tight. It's going to be a really interesting process to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about big tech, though.
Right.
These new rules also look at how children's data is handled.
Exactly.
So how does that work? Are we talking like parental consent forms
Uh,
or...
The rules state that companies will need to get verifiable parental consent
Okay.
before processing any data related to children.
Uh-huh.
The interesting thing is that the government isn't actually saying how to verify it.
Oh, so they're leaving it up to the company.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
They're leaving it up to the companies themselves.
So it's kind of like flexibility, but also a lot of
A
responsibility
huge responsibility.
to figure out how to get that consent securely and in a user-friendly way.
Right. Because if they mess up,
What happens if they mess up? I mean, data breaches are,
they're happening all the time.
yeah, they're unfortunately really common.
That's where the teeth of these regulations really come into play.
Okay.
So in the event of a data breach, companies would have to notify users immediately.
And like tell them what happened.
Yeah. Specifics about the breach, potential consequences, and what they're doing to mitigate the risks.
I bet the consequences for not properly safeguarding data are pretty serious.
Oh, yeah. The article mentions fines that could be as high as Rs 250 crore.
Whoa, that's a lot.
It's a big number. It's meant to make companies think twice about cutting corners
Yeah.
when it comes to data security.
And it's not just about penalties either.
Right.
These draft rules are also requiring companies to be more transparent with users
Ah.
about what data they're collecting and why.
It's all about clarity.
Yeah.
Like they'll have to give easy-to-understand notices so users can actually make informed decisions.
So empowering the users.
Exactly. Giving them more control over their own digital footprint. Which brings us to a crucial question for you, the listener. So what data protection laws are in place where you live?
Yeah, this whole deep dive is focusing on India,
Yeah.
but it's a good reminder to check what your country is doing to protect your data.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This whole move by India highlights how the world is thinking about data these days.
Yeah.
It's not just about protecting citizens' privacy anymore.
Right.
It's about national sovereignty in like the digital age.
It's like countries are drawing lines in the digital sand and saying,
Yeah.
our data stays here.
A great way to put it. We're seeing it everywhere.
Mm.
The European Union's GDPR was a big one.
Uh-huh.
And even in the US, there's growing concern about all this.
Yeah, for sure. I am curious, though, could this push for data localization lead to a more fragmented internet?
That's the question.
Like if every country starts building its own data walls,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be harder for information to just flow freely?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
There are really strong arguments on both sides.
Okay.
Some experts are worried that data localization will stifle innovation and economic growth.
Because it'll be harder to operate across borders.
Exactly. It makes
Yeah.
things more complicated.
But then on the flip side, isn't there also an argument for keeping data within a country's borders
Ah,
to make it easier to protect and hold companies accountable?
exactly.
Hmm.
The people who are for data localization,
Right.
they say it's essential for protecting privacy and national security.
Yeah.
They think it gives governments more control over how that data is used
Right.
and keeps foreign entities away from sensitive information.
So it's a balancing act.
It is.
And it seems like finding that sweet spot
Uh-huh.
is really key. From a user's perspective,
Right.
it's reassuring to know that your data is handled responsibly no matter where you are.
Totally. Transparency and accountability.
Yeah.
Those are the key things.
Yeah.
And the new rules in India seem to be pushing for both of those.
Mm-hmm.
But the real test is always in the implementation.
Like how it actually plays out.
Exactly. The article points out
Yeah.
that the government's not trying to disrupt cross-border data flows entirely.
Okay.
It's more about addressing specific security and sector needs.
It's a tough line to walk.
It really is. How these rules are actually put into practice and how they're enforced,
Right.
that's going to determine the real impact.
Yeah.
And we'll see how companies adapt.
Adapt or die, right?
And yeah, this could be a huge turning point for the tech industry in India.
We've talked a lot about the potential downsides of data localization,
Uh-huh.
but could there be any unexpected benefits?
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Some argue that data localization could actually boost innovation within India.
Okay.
So if companies are required to store data locally,
Yeah.
they might invest more in data centers and infrastructure there.
Oh, so creating jobs.
Exactly. New jobs and opportunities.
So it's not just a defensive move. It could help India's tech sector grow.
Right. It could also lead to new homegrown technologies
Oh, that's interesting.
that are tailored specifically for the Indian market.
We started talking about data protection,
Yeah.
but now we're talking about innovation and economic growth and even national identity in the digital age.
It all goes back to who controls our data.
Right.
This deep dive focused on India, but it really highlights a universal truth. Data is power,
Yeah.
and how that power is used by governments and companies
Right.
that's going to shape the future we live in.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? What can they do?
First, be aware. Don't just click agree.
Yeah.
Take a minute to understand what data you're sharing and how it might be used.
Do your research, know your rights?
Exactly. And if you don't like what you see,
Yeah.
speak up. Push for stronger data protection laws. Hold companies accountable.
Yeah, make your voice heard.
We all have a say in this. As our lives move more and more online,
Mm-hmm.
it's so important to be informed
Yeah.
about the stuff that governs our digital world.
It's like taking control of your digital destiny.
It is. And, you know, it starts with being informed.
Yeah.
We focused on India, but remember that question we brought up before?
What data protection laws are in place where you live?
Exactly. Take a minute, do a search. You might be surprised what you find out.
I think a lot of people would be, data privacy is not exactly dinner table conversation.
I know, right? But maybe it should be.
Yeah, maybe it should be.
Once you know the laws, though, don't stop there.
Right.
Like, are companies actually following them?
Yeah. Are they complying?
And what can you do if your data is mishandled?
It all goes back to knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
The more you know about your digital rights, the better you can protect yourself.
Exactly.
And don't be afraid to push for more from your government and the
Uh-huh.
companies you work with. Like, demand stronger data protection laws, hold them accountable for your info.
It's your data. You deserve to have a say in how it's used.
This has been a really interesting conversation.
It has.
We started with this article about India's data localization,
Right?
but it feels like we've talked about so much more.
We have.
Data privacy, innovation, the future of the internet.
It's a big conversation.
Yeah, really, it's ongoing too.
It is.
And we all need to be part of it.
We do.
Keep learning, stay informed, and speak up for your digital privacy.
That's a great point to end on.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
It's complex stuff, but hopefully we gave you some things to think about and maybe feel a bit more empowered to take control of your own digital destiny.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.